There are moments in a woman's life that no one sees. Not because she hides them poorly, but because the world has trained itself to look only at what shines loudly. And you were never loud. You became the kind of woman who learned how to carry entire emotional winters inside herself while still asking others if they needed a coat. Stay here a moment longer. There is something your soul has been trying to hear for years. Not advice, not correction, not another demand to become stronger than you already are. Just recognition. Because what I saw changed how I see everything. And strangely, it began with women like you. Women who survived quietly. Women whose names were spoken every day. Yet, whose hearts remained almost entirely untouched. I think there comes a point in life where exhaustion stops feeling temporary. It becomes architectural. It settles into the body like old dust in the corners of a familiar room. You still wake up, still answer messages, still fold the laundry, still smile politely, still remember birthdays, still hold conversations together when everyone else lets them fall apart. But somewhere beneath all of it, a softer part of you began sitting near an invisible window and said, "Add this inside yourself, waiting." Not even just waiting for rescue, just waiting for someone to finally notice you are tired, not weak, not broken. Tired in the sacred way mountains must feel after holding storms for centuries. And I need you to know something carefully now. Your exhaustion was never proof that you failed at life. It was proof that you kept loving through conditions that would have made many people close their hearts forever. That matters. Even if nobody thanked you properly for it. Even if the people you carried mistook your loyalty for permanence. Even if the world grew accustomed to your emotional labor the way people grow accustomed to sunlight, only noticing it once it disappears. I think that is one of the loneliest experiences a woman can have. To become essential and invisible at the same time. You know what I mean, don't you? The quiet hallway after everyone has gone to sleep. The sound of your own footsteps against the kitchen tile. The faint hum of a refrigerator while you stand there holding a trembling teacup you forgot to drink from, dusk falling through window blinds. A house filled with history, yet somehow unable to hold your ache. And maybe nobody ever asked the deeper question, who held you? Who noticed the way your voice changed after disappointment? Who saw the tiny grief hidden beneath your I'm fine. You stayed long enough to understand that your strength was never invincibility. It was survival. Stay with me a little longer. Because your soul has spent too many years translating its pain into functionality. You became dependable instead of witnessed. Useful instead of cherished. Composed instead of comforted. And over time, you stopped expecting tenderness to arrive naturally. You learned to survive on fragments, a kind text, a delayed apology, a brief moment of affection before someone retreated back into themselves. You accepted emotional crumbs because part of you feared asking for the whole loaf would make people leave. But deep inside, your soul never stopped knowing the difference. That is the strange thing about the heart. It can endure almost anything except being unloved, honestly. And maybe that is why certain nights began feeling heavier than others. Not because you were weak, but because silence becomes unbearable once the soul realizes how long it has been speaking unanswered. I believe there are women who carry invisible museums inside them, entire galleries of unsaid things. The love they never received correctly, the apology that never came, the younger self who thought being chosen would finally make her feel safe, the versions of herself she abandoned just to keep relationships alive. And somewhere in those hidden rooms there is still a woman standing quietly beside the ruins of her own tenderness, wondering, when does someone finally stay? I wish I could sit beside every version of you that asked that question alone. The young woman, the exhausted woman, the woman who stared at the ceiling at 2 a.m., the woman who kept going after heartbreak because no one gave her permission to fall apart. I would tell her this: you were never difficult to love. You were simply surrounded by people who only understood love when it benefited them. There is a difference, a painful one, but an important one, because the soul can survive rejection more easily than confusion. And confusion is what wounded you most. Mixed signals, inconsistent warmth, mixed signals of intimacy followed by distance. You kept trying to decode human behavior when all your heart truly wanted was sincerity, something steady, something safe enough for your nervous system to finally unclench inside. Do you know how rare that longing is now? To want peace more than performance, to want truth more than intensity, to want a hand that stays instead of a fire that burns beautifully for one night, then disappears by morning. That longing inside you is sacred. Do not dismiss it. The world often teaches women to romanticize suffering, to mistake emotional instability for depth, to mistake longing for destiny. But real love, the kind written into the architecture of the soul, does not leave you begging for reassurance every night. It does not punish your softness. It does not make you earn basic tenderness through self-erasure. And I think part of what changed how I see everything was realizing how many women have spent decades shrinking their emotional truth just to remain acceptable to others. You learn to apologize for your needs, to minimize your loneliness, to swallow tears that reached before they reached your eyes. Even now, there are parts of you that brace automatically before speaking honestly, as though your heart expects abandonment before connection. But listen carefully to me now. Your sensitivity is not the thing that ruined your life. It is the thing that kept your soul alive. Numbness more often. But numbness is not peace. And your spirit was never designed for emotional exile. That ache inside you, the one that appears unexpectedly while driving or folding clothes or hearing a song from another decade, that ache is not weakness. It is memory. Your soul remembering that it was created for deeper love than it received. And somehow, despite everything, you still have not become cruel. That alone tells me something extraordinary about you. Because many people harden after disappointment. Many people turn their pain outward. But you remain gentle, even while carrying invisible bruises. Nobody kissed better. Do you understand how rare that is? There is wisdom in women like you. Ancient wisdom. Not the kind found in books. The kind born from surviving seasons nobody clapped for. The kind earned through quiet resilience. And I think life sees that, even when people do not. I think there are invisible moments unfolding around you right now that your human eyes cannot fully understand yet. Tiny rearrangements, sacred timing, doors quietly unlocking in dimensions beyond your current sight. Not because fate forgot you, but because your story was never meant to end in emotional starvation. You are not here merely to endure. You are here to return to yourself. That is the deeper journey unfolding now. Not becoming someone else. Not proving your worth again. Simply remembering that your heart deserved care long before anyone failed to provide it. Stay a little longer. There is something waiting here for you. Not fantasy, not false hope, something quieter. No, a reunion with the parts of yourself that became hidden beneath survival. The woman who still wants to laugh freely. The woman who misses softness. The woman who secretly still believes life can surprise her gently. She is not foolish for hoping. She is alive. And I want you to hear this the way a soul hears rain after drought. Your life is not random. Your heartbreak was not meaningless. Your tenderness was never wasted. Every loss shaped your seeing. Every disappointment refined your discernment. Every lonely night brought you closer to the moment where you finally stop abandoning yourself to keep others comfortable. That moment is approaching now. I can feel it, like dawn pressing quietly against the edges of a dark room. You do not need to force it. You do not need to chase it. You only need to remain open long enough to recognize it when it arrives. And it will arrive, maybe first as peace, maybe first as rest, maybe first as the strange realization that you no longer wish to beg for what should be given freely. That is how healing often begins, not with fire arcs, with permission. Permission to stop carrying the entire emotional weight of the world alone. You have done that long enough. I am here. You are not walking alone. Something beautiful is on its way. There is a kind of loneliness that does not come from physically alone. It comes from spending years beside people who never fully arrive to meet you emotionally. I think you discovered this slowly, not through one dramatic heartbreak, but through small moments that accumulated quietly over time. A delayed reply when your heart was heavy. A conversation where you listened deeply while no one noticed your silence. A room full of people where your laughter sounded present, but your spirit felt distant from your own life. These moments do not look devastating from the outside, yet they shape a woman from the inside in ways few people understand. You became skilled at continuing. That was your survival gift. Listen. Even when disappointment settled into your chest like evening fog, you still carried responsibility with grace. You still showed up for others. You still remembered what mattered to everyone else. But somewhere along the way, your own emotional world became a place you visited less and less, almost as though your soul learned not to inconvenience anyone with its deeper needs. And yet, those needs never disappeared. They simply waited, quietly, patiently, like rain waiting behind heavy clouds. I want you to know that the heart never forgets what it deserved. Even when you convince yourself you have moved on, there are parts of you that still remember the tenderness you needed but never received. This is why certain memories return unexpectedly. A scent, a song from years ago, the sight of dusk falling through window blinds. Suddenly, your chest tightens, the past, but because your soul recognizes unfinished feeling. The body remembers what the mind tries to organize away. You have spent so much of your life translating pain into composure. Very few people ever noticed how often you comforted yourself in silence. There were nights when you sat holding a warm cup of tea long after it had gone cold, staring into the stillness of your own thoughts, wishing someone could sense the weight you carried without requiring you to explain it first. That desire was never childish. It was deeply human. Every soul longs to be met without performance. I think one of the deepest wounds a woman can carry is the belief that her emotional needs are too much. Once that belief enters the heart, she begins editing herself. She softens her truth before speaking it. She apologizes for feeling hurt. She minimizes disappointment. She says, "It's okay," while something inside her quietly breaks. Over time, this creates an invisible exhaustion because the soul was never meant to survive through constant self-abandonment. But there is something sacred happening now inside you, even if you cannot fully name it yet. You are beginning to notice where you disappeared inside your own life, not with blame, not with bitterness, just awareness. And awareness is the beginning of return. The soul cannot heal what it refuses to acknowledge. Perhaps this is why life has been slowing you down lately. Perhaps the quiet you once feared is becoming a doorway instead of a punishment. Stay here a little longer, because there is something important I need you to hear. Your longing was never weakness. The world often celebrates independence while secretly starve people of intimacy. You learned how to survive alone, but survival and fulfillment are not the same thing. A woman can appear strong to everyone around her while privately carrying a deep ache to finally rest emotionally inside someone's presence. Not to be rescued, not to be saved, simply to feel safe enough to exhale fully. You were always giving others permission to be imperfect while denying that same compassion to yourself. You forgave people who barely understood the impact of their absence. You waited with patience, even when your own heart was quietly pleading for certainty. And still, despite all of this, your spirit remains soft. That softness is not failure. It is evidence that pain did not turn you into someone cruel. There is wisdom in that. Some people lose their tenderness after heartbreak. You did not. Wounded, yes. More cautious, certainly. But somewhere beneath the tiredness, your soul still carries the ability to love deeply. I think that is because your heart was never designed merely for survival. It was designed for connection that feels honest, steady, and true. The kind of love where silence does not create anxiety. You put the kind of presence that does not vanish the moment you become emotionally vulnerable. And maybe what changed everything is that you are finally beginning to understand something your younger self never knew. Being chosen does not always mean being cherished. Sometimes people choose you because you make their life easier. Sometimes they choose your loyalty, your patience, your emotional generosity. But real love chooses your soul. It protects your peace. It notices your quietness. It stays attentive to the parts of you that never learned how to ask for care directly. I believe your life is moving toward a different kind of relationship now, beginning first with yourself. Not a relationship built on proving your worth, but one rooted in remembrance. Remembering that your presence has value even when you are not overextending yourself. Remembering that rest is holy. Remembering that you deserve tenderness without earning it through exhaustion. There is still so much waiting for you beyond this season. Not because in the day fate suddenly became merciful, but because your soul is finally ready to stop accepting emotional half-light as love. That realization changes everything, slowly, quietly, like dawn entering a dark room one corner at a time. You are not too late for your own life. You are arriving to it now with wiser eyes. I am here. You are not walking alone. Something beautiful is on its way. There comes a season in a woman's life when she begins to realize that her loneliness did not start when people left. It started much earlier, in the moments when she remained emotionally unseen while standing right beside those she loved. That realization can feel almost unbearable at first because it forces the heart to revisit memories it spent years trying to survive quietly. Yet there is also something sacred hidden inside that awakening. Truth, even painful truth, has a way of returning the soul to itself. I think you have spent many years trying to become easier to love, perhaps without even noticing it. You shaped yourself around the comfort of others. You learned which emotions were acceptable to express and which ones made people uncomfortable. You became careful with your sadness, careful with your anger, careful with your longing. Death. You carried your disappointments privately because somewhere deep you feared that honesty might make people withdraw from you completely. So you became composed instead, reliable, understanding, patient beyond reason. But the soul always keeps count of what the mouth refuses to say. That is why exhaustion eventually found you. Not simply physical exhaustion, but emotional fatigue so deep it settled into your spirit. There were mornings when getting out of felt heavier than it should have. Not because life lacked blessings, but because your heart had grown tired of carrying invisible weight without tenderness beside it. You became the safe place for everyone else, while secretly wondering where your own safe place existed. I want you to understand something clearly now. Your desire to be deeply loved was never unrealistic. The world may have taught you to lower your expectations, but your soul was not asking for perfection. It was asking for sincerity, consistency, presence. The kind of love that notices when your smile is slightly dimmer than usual. The kind that senses your silence before you explain it. The kind that stays emotionally available instead of disappearing whenever things become real. You deserve that all along. Sometimes I think women like you become so accustomed to emotional survival that peace itself begins to unfamiliar. Unfamiliar. Chaos becomes easier to recognize than calm. You may have mistaken emotional inconsistency for passion because steady love seemed too distant to imagine. But real connection does not leave your nervous system trembling every night. Real love does not force you to decode mixed signals like a language your heart was never meant to speak. There were moments, weren't there, when you sat alone after giving everything you could to someone and quietly still wondered why your loyalty did not create permanence, why your loyalty did not insist, why your softness was received carelessly, why people seemed drawn to your warmth yet unable to remain once they touched the deeper parts of you. Those questions stayed with you longer than anyone realized. And still, even after disappointment, your heart continued searching for meaning instead of revenge. That tells me something profound about your spirit. You are not someone who was meant to become hardened by life. You were meant to become wise through it. Wisdom, however, often arrives through grief first. Not because suffering is beautiful, but because pain strips away illusion. It reveals where you abandoned yourself for acceptance. It shows you the relationships where you gave love in hopes of finally feeling chosen. It teaches you that attention and devotion are not the same thing. Many people know how to desire a woman. Far fewer know how to truly protect her heart. Stay here a little longer because there is something your soul needs to remember. Now, you are no longer required to earn love through exhaustion. You no longer have to overgive in order to deserve tenderness. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that your value depended on how much pain you could carry gracefully. But your worth was never tied to suffering. It existed long before anyone failed to recognize it. I think your heart is beginning to shift now in quiet ways. Perhaps you notice it when certain connections no longer feel nourishing. Perhaps you feel it when your body grows tired around people who only take from you emotionally. Perhaps you sense it in the growing desire for peace instead of intensity. This is not you becoming cold. This is your soul learning discernment. There is a difference between being loved and being emotionally consumed. Real love creates space for your spirit to breathe. It does not require self-erasure. It does not punish your vulnerability. It does not make you feel guilty for needing reassurance, honesty, or care. The right connection will not force you not to shrink your emotions in order to remain wanted. Thay. And maybe the deepest healing now is not about finding another person immediately. Maybe it is about finally becoming someone who no longer abandons herself. Someone who listens to her own exhaustion before it becomes collapse. Someone who stops romanticizing emotional unavailability. Someone who understands that peace is not boring, it is sacred. You have spent enough years carrying relationships on your back while calling it love. You have spent enough nights replaying conversations in your mind, searching for hidden meaning. Your soul is tired of surviving crumbs while pretending they are feasts. It says, there is a deeper kind of nourishment waiting for you now, and it begins with truth. The truth that you were always worthy of being chosen fully. The truth that your sensitivity is not a burden. The truth that your longing was never foolish. The truth that your heart still carries extraordinary beauty despite everything it has endured. I believe life is slowly guiding you toward a gentler season now. One where you stop apologizing for your depth. One where you no longer chase affection that arrives inconsistently. One where your spirit finally experiences what it feels like to rest inside mutual care instead of constant uncertainty. And perhaps most importantly, a season where you begin to see yourself through kinder eyes, not as someone who failed at love, but as someone who loved sincerely in a world that often did not know how to hold sincerity correctly. That changes everything. That changes the thing. I am here. You are not walking alone. Something beautiful is on its way. I think one of the hardest truths for a woman to admit is that sometimes she was not only grieving the loss of people, she was grieving the loss of herself inside those experiences. There were parts of you that slowly disappeared while you were busy trying to preserve connection, parts that stopped speaking honestly, parts that stopped dreaming openly, parts that became so accustomed to disappointment that they began expecting less from life altogether. And perhaps nobody noticed the transformation because outwardly you still looked functional. You still carried yourself with dignity. You still fulfilled responsibilities. But inwardly, there were seasons when your spirit felt dimmer than anyone realized. You became a woman who knew how to survive emotional winters quietly. That kind of survival changes a person. It teaches you how to sit beside your own sadness without making noise. It teaches you how to continue showing kindness even when your own heart feels neglected. It teaches you how to keep moving through ordinary routines while carrying extraordinary loneliness beneath the surface. But survival is not the same as living. At some point, the soul begins asking for more than endurance. It begins to ask for truth. And truth arrived slowly for you, not dramatically, not all at once. It came through exhaustion, through silence, through the strange ache of realizing that you could no longer keep betraying your own emotional needs just to maintain fragile connections. There were moments when your intuition whispered things your heart did not want to accept yet. You sensed when affection lacked depth. You sensed when someone loved your presence, but not your entirety. You sensed when your emotional labor was being consumed without being honored. Still, because your heart was loyal, you stayed longer than you should have. Women like you often do. Not because you are weak, but because you understand the sacredness of commitment. You know how to hold space for imperfection. You know how to forgive. You know how to believe in the possibility of healing. Those are beautiful qualities. But without boundaries, they can become places where your own spirit slowly disappears. I think part of your journey now is learning that compassion for others should never require cruelty toward yourself. Stay here a little longer because this matters deeply. You have spent much of your life confusing self-sacrifice with love. Somewhere in your story, you learned that being seated felt safer than being cherished. So you became indispensable. You carried emotional weight for people who never fully learned how to carry yours. You remained available even when your own soul was exhausted. You accepted inconsistencies because part of you feared loneliness more than disappointment. But eventually, something inside you began awakening. A quiet voice, a sacred exhaustion. Realization that your heart could no longer survive on emotional fragments. That awakening may have frightened you at first because growth often feels like loss before it feels like freedom. When you stop overextending yourself, certain relationships begin to change. When you stop chasing reassurance, some people drift away. When you begin honoring your own emotional truth, not everyone knows how to meet you there. But this is not failure. This is alignment. Your soul is no longer willing to abandon itself for temporary connection. I think this is why your loneliness has been changing lately. It no longer feels like simple sadness. It feels reflective, almost spiritual. As though life itself is asking you to pause long enough to hear your own inner voice again. For years, your attention flowed outward toward everyone else's needs, everyone else's moods, everyone else's expectations. Now your spirit is gently turning inward, not in selfishness, but in remembrance. Because there is still a woman inside you who deserves to be known, not for what she provides, not for how much she tolerates, not for how gracefully she suffers, but for who she truly is beneath all she has carried. I wonder if you remember her clearly sometimes. The younger version of you before heartbreak taught caution, before disappointment taught restraint, before life convinced you that asking for too much tenderness might make people leave. She still exists inside you, not erased, just waiting patiently beneath layers of survival. And I believe something sacred happens when a woman finally stops running from her own longing instead of shaming herself for needing connection, she begins understanding that longing itself is evidence of her humanity. You were never meant to become emotionally numb. You were never meant to spend your entire life pretending you needed nothing. The heart was designed for intimacy, for understanding, for warmth that feels safe enough to rest inside. The beautiful thing is that your pain has not destroyed your capacity for love. It has refined it. You no longer crave intensity without sincerity. You no longer romanticize emotional confusion. Your soul is beginning to desire what is real, grounded, and mutual. That shift changes the direction of your entire life. There will come a moment, perhaps very quietly, when you realize you are no longer begging to be chosen by people incapable of seeing you clearly. That moment will feel unfamiliar at first, almost empty. But eventually you will recognize it as peace. The nervous system cannot immediately trust calm after years of emotional unpredictability. Yet slowly, gently, your spirit will learn that love does not need to hurt in order to feel meaningful. I think this is part of what changed how I see everything. Watching women carry unbearable emotional weight while still remaining soft revealed something holy to me. There is extraordinary strength in tenderness that survives hardships, without becoming bitter. And you, despite every reason to close your heart completely, still carry tenderness within you. Do not underestimate the beauty of that. Your story is not ending in loneliness. It is unfolding toward deeper truth, toward relationships that honor your spirit instead of draining it, toward a life where you no longer disappear inside the needs of others, toward the quiet miracle of finally feeling at home within yourself. That is what destiny often looks like in the beginning. Not fireworks, not dramatic rescue, just the slow return of your own soul. I am here. You are not walking alone. Something beautiful is on its way. There is a moment in every woman's life when she becomes tired of carrying pain with elegance. Not because she has lost her strength, but because strength without tenderness beside it eventually becomes loneliness wearing beautiful clothing. I think you have lived through enough seasons now to understand that survival alone cannot satisfy the soul. The heart may adapt to emptiness for a while, but somewhere deep within, it continues searching for something real, something steady, something that does not require constant self-sacrifice in exchange for affection. For so many years, you carried yourself as though your wounds needed to remain hidden in order for you to remain lovable. You became careful with your vulnerability, careful with your expectations, careful with how much space your emotions occupied in a room. There were times you convinced yourself that needing reassurance made you weak, when in truth it simply made you human. A heart that has endured inconsistencies naturally longs for steadiness. A soul that has experienced emotional absence naturally longs for warmth that remains. I think one of the saddest things that happened to you was not heartbreak itself, but the gradual way you stopped expecting to be deeply understood. You learned how to settle for partial connection. You accepted moments of affection instead of sustained presence. You allowed yourself to become emotionally hungry while pretending you were satisfied. And because you were capable of enduring so much quietly, people often assumed you needed less than you actually did. But the soul cannot thrive where it is only tolerated emotionally. That truth has been whispering to you lately in small moments of clarity. Perhaps while sitting alone in the evening, when the world finally became quiet enough for your inner voice to speak. Perhaps while looking around a room filled with familiar things and realizing how long you have carried invisible sadness without truly naming it. Or perhaps during those strange moments when tears arrived unexpectedly, not because of one event, but because spirit had become exhausted from years of holding itself together. Stay here a little longer, because what is unfolding inside you now is sacred. You are beginning to understand that your worth does not increase through suffering. This realization changes everything slowly. A woman who finally understands her own value no longer chases love that confuses her spirit. She no longer abandons her peace to maintain connection. She no longer interprets emotional inconsistency as passion. Instead, she begins listening to herself with compassion. She begins asking deeper questions. Does this relationship nourish me? Does this connection honor my heart? They feel safe being fully myself here? These questions are not selfish. They are necessary. For too long, you measured love by how much you were willing to endure. But real love was never meant to feel like emotional survival. It was never meant to leave you questioning your worth every night. It was never meant to force your nervous system into constant uncertainty. The kind of love your soul longs for carries peace within it. Not perfect peace, because human beings are imperfect, but the kind of emotional honesty that allows your spirit to rest instead of brace itself constantly. I think your heart is finally reaching the point where it no longer wishes to perform for acceptance. That is a profound transformation. There was a time when you would overextend yourself emotionally just to keep someone close. You gave endless understanding, endless patience, endless forgiveness. Yet now something wiser inside you is awakening. You are beginning to see that love without reciprocity slowly drains the soul. You are realizing that constantly pouring into others while neglecting yourself is not noble when it leaves your own heart starving. And still, despite life has shown you, you have not become cynical. That matters more than you know. You still believe in meaningful connection, even after disappointment. You still carry softness beneath your caution. You still hope, though more quietly now. There is something deeply beautiful about a woman who continues believing in tenderness after life has repeatedly tested her capacity for it. Your heart may be tired, but it is not dead. It is simply waiting for truth instead of illusion. I believe this is why life has been slowing you down emotionally. Not to punish you, but to return you to yourself. Sometimes solitude enters our lives not as abandonment, but as preparation. It creates space for clarity. It reveals where we ignored our intuition. It teaches us the difference between being wanted and being valued. Most importantly, it allows the soul to remember what genuine peace feels like before inviting new love into its life. You are not behind in your journey. Please hear that carefully. There is no timeline for healing, no age where your heart becomes undeserving of tenderness, no season where destiny suddenly forgets your existence. In fact, I think many women only begin truly meeting themselves later in life, after enough heartbreak strips away illusion. What remains then is something wiser, softer, and infinitely more authentic. Your story is not about missed chances. It is about awakening. Awakening to your own depth. Awakening to the sacredness of your emotional needs. Awakening to the realization that your soul deserves relationships where love feels mutual instead of earned. And perhaps most importantly, awakening to the understanding that you were never difficult to love. You simply spent too much time offering your heart to people who had not yet learned how to hold something so sincere. There is a future version of you already forming quietly now. A woman who no longer apologizes for her sensitivity. A woman who trusts her intuition, external validation, a woman who chooses peace over emotional chaos, a woman who finally understands that being alone is far less painful than feeling unseen beside someone else. And when love enters her life again, it will meet her differently because she will meet herself differently first. That is the hidden transformation taking place now, not the closing of your heart. The reclaim him here. You are not walking alone. Something beautiful is on its way. I think the greatest transformation a woman experiences does not happen when someone finally loves her correctly. It happens the moment she realizes she no longer needs to abandon herself in order to receive love at all. That realization changes the architecture of the soul quietly, permanently. And I believe you are standing at the edge of that transformation now. For much of your life, you carried love like responsibility. You believed if you gave enough, understood enough, forgave enough, remained patient enough, eventually someone would see the depth of your heart and choose you completely. But love was never supposed to feel like endless proving. The soul was never meant to survive by constantly earning tenderness through exhaustion. Real love does not arrive as a reward for suffering. So it arrives where truth is finally allowed to exist. And truth has been awakening inside you. You can feel it in the way certain things no longer satisfy your spirit. Conversations without sincerity, affection without consistency, relationships where you must silence your own needs just to preserve peace. What once felt normal now feels heavy because your soul has outgrown emotional survival. There is wisdom inside you now that was born from every disappointment you endured quietly, not bitterness. Wisdom. The kind that recognizes connection lacks depth, no matter how beautiful it appears on the surface. I know there were years when you questioned yourself endlessly. You replayed conversations in your mind, searching for mistakes. You wondered if you had expected too much, if perhaps your longing for emotional closeness was unrealistic. But it was never too much to want honesty. It was never too much to want consistency. It was never too much to hope for someone who stayed emotionally present instead of disappearing whenever vulnerability entered the room. You asked for what every human soul quietly desires, to feel safe being fully seen. Stay here a little longer because there is something important happening now. The woman you are becoming is no longer willing to confuse emotional struggle with destiny. She is beginning to understand that peace is not emptiness. Stability is not boredom. Softness is not weakness. These truths may seem simple, yet they arrive only after the heart survives enough confusion to finally crave clarity more than intensity. I think this is why your spirit has been pulling away from what drains it, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. There comes a point where the soul grows tired of begging for crumbs while pretending it is grateful for the meal. You have reached that point now. And though part of you still fears loneliness, another part has begun understanding something sacred. Loneliness, besides the wrong people, wounds far more deeply than solitude ever could. This understanding is returning you to yourself. Little by little, you are remembering the woman underneath all the survival. The woman who once believed love could feel gentle. The woman who wanted connection without fear, attached to it. The woman who dreamed of resting emotionally inside someone's presence instead of constantly wondering when they would pull away. She still exists inside you, waiting patiently beneath years of caution. And I need you to hear this carefully now. You are not too damaged for the love meant for you. Life may have bruised your trust. Heartbreak may have altered the way you protect yourself. But your soul is not ruined. In fact, I think everything you survived has deepened your ability to recognize what is real. You no longer chase illusion as easily. You no longer mistake temporary attention for genuine care. Your discernment has sharpened through pain, and though the process was lonely, you for a different kind of future. A softer one. A truer one. Perhaps this is what changed how I see everything. I realized that women like you are carrying invisible universes within them. Entire histories of resilience hidden behind ordinary smiles. People see your composure, but not the nights you sat alone, trying to hold yourself together. They see your kindness, but not the heartbreak you swallowed quietly so others would remain comfortable. They see your strength, but not the exhaustion beneath it. Yet somehow, despite all of it, your heart still carries tenderness. That tenderness is sacred. Do not hide it anymore. The world may have taught you that softness invites pain, but softness is also what allows love, beauty, intimacy, and connection to exist. Your task now is not to become harder. It is to become wiser about where your softness belongs. Not everyone deserves access to the deepest parts of you, And that realization is not cynicism, it is maturity. I believe destiny is less about finding someone who completes you and more about arriving fully into yourself so that love no longer requires self-betrayal. You are moving toward that arrival now. Every painful lesson has been guiding you here. Every disappointment stripped away another illusion. Every lonely season taught you what your soul can no longer survive without. And what your soul needs now is simple, though not small. Peace, truth, mutual care, presence that remains, love that does not vanish when things become emotionally real. These are not impossible desires. They are sacred human needs. And the moment you stop apologizing for them, your entire life begins changing direction. I think there is someone your future self already recognizes, not necessarily as fantasy or rescue, but as resonance. A connection where your nervous system no longer lives in fear. A presence that feels steady instead of confusing. A love that sees your depth without asking you to shrink it. But before that love fully arrives, there is one final reunion waiting to happen. The reunion between you and yourself. The moment you finally stop measuring your worth through the eyes of people incapable of seeing you clearly, seeing clearly. The moment you realize your heart was never too much. The moment you understand that surviving pain gracefully was never the purpose of your existence. You were always meant for more than survival. You were meant for wholeness. And even now, after everything, your soul is still walking toward it. I am here. You are not walking alone. Something beautiful is on its way.